Welcome everyone to Awesome Truth, a wrestling book club. I'm your host, Steve Semino, and with me as always is my co-host, Walt Schwenk. Hey, Walters.
Hello, Steven. How's it going?
My friend, I stepped on you a little bit there. My apologies, but my friend, it is going very well. We are back on Awesome Truth. First episode of 2023, Walt. Happy New Year.
Yes, that's when this is coming out.
Yeah, recording it slightly in advance in anticipation of taking some time off for the holidays from our unpaid wrestling book club jobs. But happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year to all of our listeners out there. And we are bringing you what I think is a treat. I do not know Walt's take on this, but we've watched, Walt, a lot of Roddy Piper acting performances for this show. Not a lot, I guess, but more than, I guess, anyone else in any other pro wrestler acting. Maybe him and The Rock are neck and neck in terms of pro wrestlers acting on screen. And so I thought it was time to watch a movie that I adore. Without a doubt, Roddy Piper's best performance. Of course, I'm speaking of 1988's They Live, John Carpenter's They Live.
Yeah, we did watch this. And I mean, I'm trying to think of Piper. Once you said that, I started to think about Piper's IMDb. I'm like, I can only think of a few. There's They Live. There's Wrestlers
vs.
Zombies, which we covered notoriously, and there's the Always Sunny episode with the troops putting on the show for the troops,
which we have not covered, but we did also cover the tag team. Cover.
Oh, well, tag team. Yes, that's also a thing he did. So, yeah, I guess we have done a lot of Piper stuff, which is good, because I like watching Roddy Piper, oddly.
He's pretty good. I mean, this is literally a starring role. If you haven't seen They Live, John Carpenter movie, if you know John Carpenter, very much in his wheelhouse.
Remind me of John Carpenter.
Yes,
actually,
John Carpenter is the director of Halloween, of Escape from New York, of Escape from L.A., of The Thing, of many, many other 80s movies. Christine, Ghosts of Mars, the movie you might know, Walt, from our growing up. Like, that was a little more contemporary. So he's a renowned director from mostly the 70s and the 80s, but he stopped working about 10 or so years ago, 15 or so years ago, but he was extremely prominent. Halloween being, of course, his biggest hit, like, you know, a cash cow, money-making franchise machine, which he was involved in to a certain extent after the first one, but the first one obviously is the one everyone cares about. It's the one that's actually good. And so he was the king of like sci-fi satire, political leanings in it, low budget. Like, he rarely got to work with a high budget, and like very sort of cool movies, I would say, for lack of a better term. Like, Kurt Russell was in many, many of his movies, and he plays Snake Plissken in the Escape movies, and a lot of like badass and Piper here is doing, a Kurt Russell type thing, a little more like smiley, I think. Kurt Russell was very stone serious in a lot of Carpenter, but this is Piper, certainly being like definitely. This one's way more tongue in cheek, Like, this one is. I think that you don't cast Roddy Piper in a movie unless you want to sort of fuck around and have a good time, because he's certainly not a good actor in the sense of gravitas and dramatic chops,
So the way you just rattle off John Carpenter's IMDb felt like me rattling off pay-per-views, WWF pay-per-views from the 1995.
I do like John Carpenter. And I will say, Blank Check, a podcast I really love, they run through whole filmographies, and they did John Carpenter about a year and change ago. So I watched every John Carpenter movie along with their podcast. So I like him already, and I also have seen them all now because I like that podcast. So hence why I have so much knowledge here.
And that context is actually very helpful for me, because I've heard the name and I've seen other stuff, and I'm sure I've seen other Carpenter. Maybe I haven't, actually. Now that you
must have seen Halloween at some point, right?
I've never seen a Halloween.
Wow. I mean, have you seen
ever.
The Thing?
No.
The Thing is one of the best movies of all time.
Is it? Wow.
It's a masterpiece. I think you should absolutely watch. The Halloween's just great. Like, you've seen all the new stuff and you think it's all stupid, and like, I'm sure Michael Myers.
I haven't seen the new stuff. I haven't seen any of them.
Oh, well,
Jamie Lee Curtis has been in like a million of these, and I'm like, I still don't know what she is.
Well, the first one is great. The first one is one of those, first movies that has obviously no idea what's going to come next, and it's incredibly straightforward slasher Halloween, horror movie. Like, there's just no bells and whistles, which is great. And then it becomes this whole, process afterwards. This whole machine, but the first one's very stripped down and very fun to watch. It's a good next October maybe you and your lady hunker down and watch some Halloween.
There'll probably be a new one out by that point.
Well, don't watch any of those. Those aren't good. Just watch the first one and then.
Is he even involved in the new ones?
He's a producer, so he gets a nice chunk of change. But I think he just literally rubber stamps it and says, "Okay."
All right. Well, so then I really haven't seen much.
Wow. Yeah, those are the big ones. If you haven't seen those, then this probably was your first John Carpenter. But Big Trouble in Little China. Did you ever see that?
No.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. That makes sense. Is it Kurt Russell? Yeah.
Kurt Russell was in Big Trouble in Little China.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Great movie.
Also, but like They Live has been on my like pop culture radar for a long time. So this is my first viewing of They Live as well, and I only know it for a few reasons. One, because of all those like odd, iconic lines that are spit out by Roddy Piper's character, who
like the bubblegum line, presumably.
The bubblegum line, the pig and the perfume line. But so most importantly, the long drawn out fight scene with Keith David.
Yes.
That was spoofed in South Park like
you
20
dirty
years
motherfucker.
Ago. Which like at the time I'm like, this is hilarious. I have no idea why. And then it's like, oh, it's from They Live. Like, okay, now I understand why this is even funnier. So this is a thing that I knew about, and I kind of knew it was Piper's like big leading role, outside of tag team, of course, from that time, and like did stand up, did have some cachet in culture in some way. So like, but I didn't know anything about the plot. I didn't know anything about like the satire and the political messaging and the aliens. I thought it was like, is it a zombie or is it a body snatcher? I thought it was something like that. So I was kind of close.
Yeah.
That was my context for all this.
Okay, that's good to know. I honestly did not. Like I said, we only just decided on this and not in passing, but in like, hey, this looks good. Or like, we should do this because Piper. But I didn't realize you were so unfamiliar with all this. This is great because you're truly dipping your toe in with no knowledge whatsoever. And I will say, as other context, when this came out, everyone thought it was weird as shit. Everyone, because it came out in the Reagan era, obviously, and it's a pretty unsubtle commentary on capitalism and big money and Reaganomics and all that kind of stuff. And I think that was still in vogue at the point. So everyone was just like, John Carpenter, crazy old man, post Halloween. Like Halloween had been 15 years ago at this point. So I think everyone was like, John Carpenter lost his fastball. This movie costs like $3 million, I think. So there was a strong sense of like he's slumming it now. No Kurt Russell, like he's just sort of wrestlers in it. Like I think there was a lot of just slander bandied about for this movie because they thought it was just cheap and dumb. But in the last 25 years, it's been reclaimed for sure as still cheap and certainly on the nose, but also very fun and very silly, and while still carrying a message. Like, whether you're fully on board with the message or not, I think everyone appreciates that, like, John Carpenter didn't give a fuck. He's like, I don't like Ronald Reagan, I don't like capitalism, and so I'm making a weird movie about it with aliens and glasses and Roddy Piper, and he just unabashedly did it, and then everyone just sort of had to reckon with it over the next couple decades.
So I'll be funded by Deep Pocket Hollywood to make a commercial film to relay how much I hate capitalism.
Which is like a James Cameron vibe these days. Is like the bigger budget examples. Like, I hate all this military-industrial complex and all this other shit, and I love the Earth, but I'm also going to make a $500 million movie about it. And you're like, well, those things are a little incongruous, but I guess I get your point.
Yeah. So to me, and I'm glad you're saying like this context, because like, it's very consistent with how I feel. Like this played out like an episode of Black Mirror, only with like a little bit less concept, a little less heady, and just more
and
like
and less serious, obviously too.
It was pretty serious though.
Yeah, but it's also but it's Roddy Piper. I think people who critiqued it for that were sort of on the money. Like It doesn't shy away from what it means, but it's also like it's pretty ridiculous. Like you get an hour into the movie, and the big fight you're talking about with Keith David and Piper is over Keith David refusing to put the glasses on. It's the stakes never get, though the stakes are technically high in terms of what the movie is doing. They never really get that high.
Right, that's fair. I think there is a sincerity to this movie though, and the odd lines that Piper was given and said make it feel more campy. But if you take those lines out, which are iconic for a reason because they're like ridiculous, but if you take those lines out, this movie plays pretty straight up for the most part. I mean, but like yes, it's ridiculous, but at least it's sincere.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas those lines really make it feel insincere. Like it's like, oh, let's give a like we don't know what we are kind of vibe. It's like let's throw a comedy line in here for the sake of comedy. But like up until those iconic lines of him talking about the pig with perfume and the bubblegum line, it's like nothing you did leading up to this made me feel this guy had any wit.
Yeah.
Or any personality. Like that's just why I thought he was good. He's like, oh, this like quiet, vagrant, like downtrodden guy who's just scraping by and just looking for an opportunity to like do anything, and then like stumbles upon this like crazy plot, like this alien plot. It's like, yeah, none of that led to him saying anything he did halfway through the movie.
You're right too. He never like he's pointedly there's a line in the movie where he's not ideologically fired up at any of this. Like he tells Keith David, he's like, I'm just looking for an honest day's work and honest day's pay. Like I believe in America. I think if you give me my chance, I'm just going to looking to take it. And then when he finds out, of course, he's like, oh, of course it's some bullshit like this. And he instantly gets really frustrated and really mad about it. But there's no indication up to that point that he really cares about anything beyond just like living day to day, you know? So it is really funny, like you're saying, how the switch just flips right away. He's like, fuck this. And he starts like killing cops and like he gets very involved very fast, which I guess is you probably would if you saw that half the world was sort of aliens. But the outrageousness just comes out of nowhere and is very sincere but very all-encompassing too. You know, all of a sudden there's just the whole world is his enemy and he's just going crazy and turns into an action hero.
Right, and with the action hero transformation turns like movie, like just typical movie lines that you would hear in a Rush Hour or Beverly Hills Cop or something, where it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. These people are a little wild, a little like, or they're kind of funny, and that's what we're kind of angling for. Not that I have an issue with it. Just so we're clear, I don't have an issue with any of this. I thought this movie was inoffensive. I thought it was a nice romp. I enjoyed myself. I love Keith David.
Yeah.
I really like Roddy Piper. So overall, I have no notes.
Okay. Well, let's split this into two then. Let's do Piper first because we are a wrestling book club podcast, and then we'll talk a little bit about the movie as a whole. Because, like we said, we watched Piper do other things. You know, we've seen him star in a pilot for a network show in an era when there weren't many channels. So in theory, if tag team had gotten picked up, he could have become like a big star, you know, like that was presumably the idea. Like Roddy Piper is the next wisecracking, you know, maybe not Schwarzenegger, but someone in that sphere, like a maybe a small screen version of that would seem to be the idea. And then, you know, we know him from, like you said, Sonny and the shitty, really truly campy stuff like the Zombies movie we watched. Like, what are your thoughts on Piper as an actor now that we've seen him do this big role here and then combine with the other stuff we've seen doing the show?
I enjoy watching Piper. I think it does a good job of like being a little brooding, being like introspective, which is like the beginning of this movie. He's just kind of like a guy, and you could tell there's like more thought happening there, but there's a lot of struggle. He has a lot of good nonverbal, which I think has translated across many different iterations of him, where he's a little unhinged, but like he's not telling you, he's not saying he's unhinged. He just looks and feels unhinged, and so that kind of comes out in different ways with his characters, like kind of like his wrestling persona too. Like you know, as long, he stays close to home like that. So to me, as a wrestling fan, I'm used to seeing him like that and can believe him getting into these characters in that way. So I think this is a great example of that. And in a completely farcical scenario where he's fighting aliens and, you know.
No, so. I mean, I think that's right. I think, you know, if we compare him to like, you know, the two of the like Batista and even Cena, or I put them in a different category because they've sort of transcended action hero-ness. Like Batista in particular, like gets meaty roles now, and Cena seems to be doing his own thing, leaning mostly towards comedy, obviously as Peacemaker, which is a mix of both. Like they stopped trying to be Schwarzenegger. They stopped trying to be Stallone to a certain extent. You know, like they're at the very least they're doing a lot of tongue-in-cheek versions of that in a very modern 2020-ish context. But you know, comparing Piper to, let's say, Hogan or let's say Rock, because Rock seems like he's like, I'm gonna do Hogan, but actually get the level of Schwarzenegger better. You know, I'm gonna do it right, what Hulk was trying to do several decades ago. And if you compare that to Piper, like Piper just has I think he has such a nice command of, yeah, like you said, what makes him tick. Like, he knows how to take sort of his character that he did for years in the ring and translate it to a performance. Like, he knows what his range seems to be, so he doesn't try and get too serious. He knows what's supposed to be, I think, a little silly, a little over the top. He knows when he's supposed to be somewhat, you know, do the sincere parts, which this movie has a surprisingly large amount of. Like, like I said, I don't think he has any gravitas necessarily, but he seems like he understands the concept of acting, you know? Like, he gets like, oh, this scene is supposed to be a little of this, and that scene is supposed to be a little like there's certain shades to him. Like, I just think that's impressive because as good as he was as a, you know, in-ring, you know, performer, it was a lot of, and as good as he was on the mic, like, it was definitely a lot of, you know, yelling, and certainly in the beginning a lot of heelish stuff. Like, I think seeing him do some of these things, you're like, oh, there's a niceness to him. The guy doesn't have to all be mean, scary wrestler guy. Like, he has a pleasantness and a jovialness to him sometimes. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was a Piper thing until I saw him do some of this.
Yeah, and you see that more from tag team too, where It's like, oh, like he can, like, I felt like it was really odd when he was trying to be nice to Helen, what's her name? Holly, what's her name?
Yeah.
Just because, like, yeah, I mean, so I'm not sure what the point of that is, but ultimately it felt like he has like a short range, and depending on the things around him dictate like the nuances of, like, a little bit more jovial, a little bit more like brooding, and it's, you know, but yeah, I mean, I think I agree with your assessment that he kind of understands his role, and he's not trying to like to really do anything beyond what he is capable of doing, which that awareness is good. Because I think we have seen that with some of the other examples you said of like, oh wow, Batista's trying to do this, like, that was good, but then sometimes it's not as good. Or John Cena, like, I feel like Cena in the Rock is the Rock, always the Rock, and Cena is like trying to be like slapstick, like, but also serious in these weird comic book movies and stuff. And
sometimes you are like, you know, as much as I enjoy him, you are like, well, that's John Cena trying hard to be funny, you know, like,
yeah,
like, oh, I'm so big, and it's like, yeah, we get it, you're big, you know.
Right. Mind you, I haven't seen all of Peacemaker, but I've seen maybe 40 minutes, but I get it. Sure. But yeah, I mean, I think Piper, and especially at that time too, like at that time, the roles he did take and got, I never felt like he couldn't do. Like between tag team and They Live, I'm like, yeah, I could see Piper in both of these before I even like clicked on the channel, if that makes sense. I mean, like, yeah, whereas like Hogan is anything Hogan does, I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to see this first before I really can get behind this.
Yeah, Hogan was all, you know, not saying anything we don't all probably fully agree on at this point, but Hogan is so much just look and general like magnanimous personality, like, you know, felt bigger than life, even though he sucked at acting and portraying any sort of character. You're like, okay, there's something about you that is electric and intriguing, and I like that, but I don't like you saying you're like, I'm George Smith. It's like, no, you're not. You're Hulk Hogan. What are you talking about? That's crazy. But I think Piper works so well here too. Is like the movie, obviously, especially at the end, like it becomes not just about Reaganomics, but like about you know, yuppies and about people, you know, glomming on to to this takeover of the world because they're like, come on, we want to get our cut. It's what's the problem in getting your fair share as the world falls apart. And I think Piper has a very blue collar vibe, and I think the idea, just casting a wrestler in general is a really good blue collar vibe for this movie. Like I think it gives you that campy element for sure, especially when Piper's saying his iconic lines and doing the weird shit. But I think it also, like, if it was a movie star like a Kurt Russell, which a lot of people wish it had been in retrospect, they're like, man, Piper sucks. If only it was Kurt Russell. And I always say, like, I think it has to be Piper. Like, Kurt Russell's a real movie star. Like, I think it becomes less of a critique of culture and society if it's a rich guy doing this. Like, Piper seems like a regular dude, and like as a wrestler, like even though he was a famous wrestler, there's a big gap between famous wrestler and famous actor. Like I think it's to their benefit they said go with that sort of meatheady dude who has some charm and some fun to him, and that'll make the message hit home even inadvertently or not even more.
Yeah, and speaking as a wrestling fan too, with the wrestling lens and perspective, it's not to be too meta, but it's like a wrestler who's acting in this role, it's easy for them to understand the struggle of like, I have nothing or I'm struggling to get by. And because every wrestler, that's the story of every wrestler. I mean, you could say that about actors too, but like to your point, like you're not landing on your back in front of 10 people. Like there's just like a level of struggle there that it goes beyond any other struggle. And so like, being able to emote that and channel that, I feel like was perfect for this role in this way. And so that way, for me, it was very believable to see like an unhinged wrestler who can't even get like a week's worth of pay, like consistently, to go, once you realize that the world is like a lie, go on a complete like breakdown as a result. It's like, yeah, I could see a pro wrestler doing that. Like that makes sense to me.
I love too that in the Keith David Piper fight, the legendary fight, like I was waiting, like I remember when The Rock first started doing movies, it was like, I believe it was The Rundown, like he does a rock bottom, and he probably does a rock bottom in other movies too, but I remember just everyone sort of making the joke like, oh, of course Rock does a rock bottom in the fucking movie. But I love that Piper does a gut wrench suplex and a back suplex and a clothesline in his fights in this movie. I was like, that's like, no matter what, they still have to have, I mean, like, I guess why not? You got a guy who knows how to do the moves, let him do the moves, but I just love seeing wrestling moves incorporated into real fights. I'm like, I don't know if that ever, although I have seen you do a sunset flip, not in a fight, but in a real world scenario, so it's not like you can't do a wrestling move in a real scenario.
Shout out to friend of the show, Brad.
Yes.
Assuming he's listening.
Did you catch? Did you see the gut wrench suplex though? Did you note that? I popped
the back
in my
suplex
room.
Too. The back suplex right before that, off the car.
Yes, that's right.
So, or belly to back, or whatever they call it. It was
Shawn Michaels' finishing move when he had the back suplex in the beginning, right?
Yeah, and that weird time where that was the super kick was not his finisher, which
yeah.
was so stupid.
It was the lead up to the back suplex.
Yeah. But for some reason, in the context of that fight, I could stomach those moments more. I don't know. Maybe that was just because I want to, but I feel like that fight was so drawn out that like punching the guy after 10 minutes isn't doing anything. I might as well start throwing him around. You know what I mean? So
a lot of sleeper. I'm surprised they resisted the allure of the sleeper there too. It would have been perfect for that scenario.
Yeah, or a headlock, just like a front headlock.
Yeah, but either way, it's a great fight though. It's one of those ones, I think, like you said, from South Park in particular, you know it's coming, or you're aware of its existence, and I think you watch it and you realize, like, this is truly going on for 10 minutes. Like, this is...
Yeah.
And again, the stakes are, put the glasses on, and Keith David's saying, no, and Keith David is so insistent about not putting the glasses on, which doesn't really make any sense either. Why would he be so mad about the glasses, you know? He has no reason to oppose it that strenuously, but he just is absolutely not doing it.
Yeah, right. It's so silly.
Yes. But Keith David, who's in The Thing and is great in The Thing, has worked with John Carpenter before, so he know the Carpenter vibe and he knew what he was getting into. And like, I think him and Piper are a great team too, because Keith David obviously wonderful actor, certainly not a award-winning actor by those metrics, but has been around for decades, is in everything, great stuff, schlock, like he does runs the whole gambit. And I think adding him to this movie, he does add the gravitas, and he makes it feel like, okay, this is a real movie. Like, as much as there's a pro wrestler on one side of it, there's this beloved actor on the other side who can give it a little more weight and a little more oomph to it.
Oh yeah, Keith David's great. He's
big too, so you buy that he can keep up with the Piper type. He's tall. He's fat in this too. I remember watching Keith. He put on some pounds here, but it looks like he could go toe to toe with Piper at least a little bit.
Just the voice is very iconic.
The best.
I just saw him in Nope, and already out of the first 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, okay. This is great.
Yeah, when you see him in a movie, there's a sense of reassurance. Okay, cool. I know what I can guess what Keith David's going to be here. In Armageddon, he's a general. You're like, okay, he's got some stature there. And in Nope, he's the dad. You're like, okay, something might not happen to Keith David here, because this seems like just to get me a little sympathy. And in this, it's okay, Keith David's a real guy, and he can when he's in the scene with Piper, he has to do a little more of the acting maybe, but that's great because that's what he's there for,
Yeah, well, he's just I was gonna say the straight man here, but I don't even know how I'd say that.
Yeah, he's the steady hand though. He's and he also gets he gets a little more of the exposition. He's the one who hates capitalism, so he gets to do a little more of the monologuing in the beginning, which I think is really smart. It's great, and like you sort of hinted at, having Piper be sort of a friendly dope in the beginning is smart from a keeping you engaged in the movie standpoint, because if it was Piper who was an ideologue who was yelling about the weight of the world, you'd be like, ugh, that's not Piper's forte. But David being the one who has the rants and the things to complain about, it just makes much more sense. I'd much rather hear Keith David monologue than Roddy Piper.
That's true. Yeah, he, from a context and exposition standpoint, you're right. Yeah, let's give him the monologues. But his character is interesting too, in a sense that he wants to help, but he doesn't know if he trusts him. And then later, Piper's character is on the run and he's murdering people, but he's still giving him his paycheck. But he's still I don't want to be associated with you, but here's money. It's obviously once he put the glasses on and he saw the world, they're tag team now. Great. But leading up to that, I'm not sure why he's doing any of these things for this man. He shouldn't care. And at times he's outwardly I don't want to be around you.
Stop talking to me, Roddy Piper. I don't want to do this.
And he's also just mind your own damn business. Don't get involved. And then he got involved, and it's all right, well, I'm gonna come back and tell you to stop getting involved again. It's just stop talking to him, man. If you don't like him, then you don't have to give him money. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah, this is something I love about this movie, and I would say this movie's reputation is, I think it's incredible. I really, really, really like this movie. I think it has a reputation of, you have to sort of be on its wavelength to really like it, because it is sort of dumb, and there are sort of narrative leaps you got to make with it. It's a really short movie. It's 90 minutes long. It's quick, and it doesn't really. It's not everybody makes a ton of sense. You sort of got to just go along with it. Like you said, the characters sort of turn on a dime. There's really no reason for Keith David to be friends with Piper. The fact that Piper becomes a vengeance delivering action hero after he gets the glasses, it all, you got to just sort of nod your head along with the movie. So I'm curious, did you like it? What's your final outcome on this one? Could you give it a number ranking out of 5? Or
I'd say it was a romp.
Okay. Was it a treat?
It was a treat.
All right.
It was a treat. Once you're in it, and it's you could. Here's the thing: you could critique the shit out of this movie for days if you really want to, but why would you do that?
Why would you watch it in the first place if you don't know? That's, again, the Piper thing, I think, just sets, and I can see why people back in 88 they thought it was dumb. But if you go into it going, okay, this is a Carpenter movie starring a wrestler, bring it on, and I think then you will not be remotely disappointed. If you go into it thinking it's going to be more than that, I don't know why you would, but let's say for the sake of argument, I can see why you'd be like, ooh, this isn't my cup of tea. But I also think that you're being silly if you're that person.
But it had a point. There was a plot. You get invested. It's I want to see what is going on? Why are there aliens? What is this plot? What is the point? And they answer all of it, and there's a resolution, and
then it ends with boobs, which is weird.
I'm not really. That ending aside,
which sort of undercuts the message to a certain extent and just seems fun and gratuitous, but whatever. John Carpenter was getting to be a weird old man at that point, so maybe that was part of the vibe. Hard to say, but yeah. I think it's a wonderful movie. I really enjoy it. I just think it's so silly and so campy. And I think it makes sense that Piper didn't do much after this, because I think he did probably only work in certain roles. Like, I don't think he should have become the star of stars, but it does. I'm happy this exists. Even though we never got to see, Piper never had a huge acting career. He had one of the quietly stronger ones of any pro wrestler, and I think this is like one of the magnum opuses for wrestler actors. I think there are rarely do you get to by the time The Rock does it, he's barely The Rock anymore. I think for a fairly active pro wrestler to get a meaty role like this and basically hit maybe not a home run, but inside the Parker home run or a triple, I think that stands out and is worthy of praise.
Yeah, I'd say he did his job well, and at no point was I like, get this guy off the screen, get this guy out of this movie. Like, I was invested. I was following him. Like, I'm not trying to take the fact that I like him as a wrestler. Like, I cared about where he was going, what he was doing, and how many people he was going to murder, I guess.
How many aliens he was going to get retribution against for messing up our society.
Right. So I would say, job well done.
There you go. Well, Roddy Piper and They Live. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Walt mostly recommends it. It's a 90-minute movie, so I think it's really worth everybody's time. It's just such a short little romp. So if you haven't seen it, kick off your 2023. Roddy Piper, They Live, Keith David. It's quite the little experience.
Yeah, it's a romp.
It's a romp. There's no one will argue with that, right? I think that's undebatable.
Just you're on the ride. You just ride the ride.
Yeah, enjoy ride. If you listen to this show, you've probably already seen it, but if you haven't, I doubt you're going to be anti a Roddy Piper movie. So right. That would be weird. Well, if you want to hear more about Roddy Piper, his performances, his work in schlock like Pro Wrestlers vs. Zombies, or the pilot tag team that never went anywhere, you can find all of that in our archives at awesometruth.libsyn.com. You can subscribe to us and hear all of our new episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all the podcast apps. We are on all of them. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at awesometruthpod. Well, great to talk Roddy Piper with you. Great to kick off the new year with something pleasant. This wasn't a crappy documentary, a cobbled together clip show. Like that alone brings me joy in and of itself.
Yeah, let's watch more movies.
Yeah, honestly, let's just watch movies.
Please.
We can watch Jungle Cruise next. I know we have a friend who would love to come on our Jungle Cruise episode if we want to talk. If we're really expanding our horizons at this point.
I'm into romps, so if it lives up to that expectation, then I'm in.
All right, well, we'll see about that. For now, thank you all so much for listening, and remember, the truth will set you free.